Welcome to the Revolution Church podcast.
Well, hello everyone. I'm recording this, at 8:30 on Saturday night because I'm not going to be here tomorrow. I'm going to be traveling tomorrow, so I can't be in two places at one time. If I could, that would be super cool. Welcome. Some of you may get on this now. I don't think so, but I'm going to record this, try to let you guys know that it's here. Hopefully you'll see the title and watch it. But yeah, this is, I'm doing this now for tomorrow. I see we got one person who said hello. So hello. I have work tomorrow, so this is what's happening. So I've got, this is happening right now. I'll be traveling tomorrow. And so I'm recording the service ahead of time. Live in front of a studio audience of one. Me and Carl. So here we are. I just watched this documentary on Sinead O'Connor. And I have to say, Sinead O'Connor is not only my hero, but she is someone who's never made a bad album. She's also someone who suffers from mental health issues. And I am, yes, expect a selfie. I'm a big fan of hers. I watched her documentary. It's really good. I really hope a lot of folks in the media apologize to her, and I really hope Saturday Night Live invites her back on to sing again. I think that would be really, 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 really cool. So that was very inspiring, honestly, to be able to watch that documentary. I didn't even realize I had it, but I have Paramount Plus for my kids because there's like this crazy cartoon that they like, and somehow Showtime was free on there. So boom. Nice surprise for Jay. So yes, it's Revolution After Dark. You can only see that it's dark through that slight slit right there where I've been working on my daughter's shelf because I got the wrong colored spray and screwed it up, but I fixed it today. So yay. So where are we? Listen, I've been reading this book. I started reading this book, and this has a little bit to do with the talk, this evening's talk, today's talk, wherever you're at. Maybe you're listening somewhere. Is this Paulus? But it is it's this guy's friendship. It's this guy Rollo May's friendship with Paul Tillich, and it's really cool. And it's just talking about their friendship, and I love knowing personal facts about theologians and philosophers and musicians and all these people I admire. I feel like it gives me kind of another type of insight into their work, and sometimes it really speaks volumes if you can see, especially where trauma lies, because trauma often plays a big part in a lot of our works. Yours truly. And one of the things that I was talking about in the book, and I think this is one of the things I would like to do here with Revolution Gathering, is that one of the things Tillich asked people to do is make the decision to risk, to get into a type of thinking in theology and philosophy that makes a decision to risk and go in and maybe be wrong, maybe screw up, maybe make mistakes, maybe find some answers while you're at it, but this decision to risk. And I feel like that's what we're trying to do here at Revolution. I feel like we've always been trying to, like, I've always worked to try to be ahead of things and thinking constantly about where people should be and how we can be better as a church and things like that. And Fortunately or unfortunately, it has always got me into quite a bit of trouble. So strange. A friend of mine sent me some pictures from Cornerstone 2002 that I spoke there. I used to love to speak at Cornerstone. Like I thought that was it. I thought that was like I made it. I'm at Cornerstone, and always making the long journey up to Bushnell, Illinois, and so I got to speak there quite a few times. I think 5 or 6 times, and I really always enjoyed it. But that last year, I got in some trouble, and I remember it was because I'd done this big study before my talk. I always took that talk super seriously and this time they had me like doing 4 or 5 talks. I actually gave one of my talks to my friend Jeremy Rich, and they got mad at me that I gave one of my talks away. But it was like, it's a lot to do, a lot to talk every day. But anyhow, so so I mean, and this was I didn't have a computer at this time. I mean, we had a computer at the office, but that's not how I studied. I studied with all my Strong's concordances out. My dad would send me all these different Strong's concordances and the Greek and Hebrew books with the linear, with the notes, and you numbers, and you find the number, and you go, oh, the Strong's number. Okay, I gotta look up the number. Okay, what does that mean? And I just recently bought one of these again because I realized I don't ever look at biblical dictionaries online, so I just bought this expository dictionary of the New Testament words. And it's so good because you realize like how these words shift and change and the nuances, and you're able to see things a lot clearer. And sometimes it makes things a lot more like understandable. It takes away some of the like Lord of the Ringish, magician, miracle worker, which Jesus did that stuff, but it takes away some of that. Allows you to go, oh, it's not all about like, everything. Some of the things Jesus says are actually practical, and some of the things Paul's saying is practical. They're not asking us to like become super saints or anything. So I like that. But anyway, so I was talking at the Cornerstone Music Festival in 2002, and it would be my last one in Bushnell. I did speak at one in Florida, and I got in trouble for that too, and I can't remember why. I think I was booked for the wrong day, and I don't know. I was always causing trouble. I didn't mean to cause trouble. I really didn't. But for some reason, the wires always got crossed, and rightfully so. Speakers probably aren't as on the high list of making sure they're taken care of, and things are working for them as much as the musicians. I get that. So anyway, I spoke and I found this Strong's Concordance about holiness, and holiness as being something that's bestowed upon us, given to us. And I said, holiness isn't something that you long for; it's something that's bestowed upon you. I mean, that's what I said. And this guy goes, "Oh, come on!" In the audience, I'm like, "Oh," and I'm like, "Oh, really?" So I start talking to him, and then realize it's the guy who books all the speakers, who is heckling me or talking back to me. And I'm like, "Oh," and so I give him the interpretation. I read the Strong's number and all this stuff because I have it all written down. And then I prayed. And the reason I prayed was because my dad said, if you ever get confused and freaked out in the middle of a talk, just breathe, take a minute, ask everybody to pray. And that's what I did. And we went on, and life went on. So there you go. And it's funny, as I was watching the Sinead O'Connor doc, it was watching how she did things before her tearing up the Pope picture, that, she was already saying things that were getting her in trouble. So I think there's like just type of people who just like to cause trouble, and that happens. As the older I get, the less I want to cause trouble. I have to follow my convictions, but I just want to like raise my kids and do this work that I love to do, which gets harder and harder, but that's what you do. Hello, Central Florida. Someone from Central Florida. Andrea, I think your thing just faded away. Well, hello. I hope you guys are doing well, keeping your lights on. We've been thinking about you. I lived in Florida for quite a while. I went to high school at Dr. Phillips, Florida, and Dr. Phillips in Orlando, Florida, and also lived in St. Petersburg and went through a few of those hurricanes, and nothing like this one, but some that were very, very scary. That's a scary thing to go through. Unbelievable, the pictures we're seeing back from Florida. So we are praying and thinking about you guys definitely down there. Yeah, man, the world is just a crazy place sometimes. Anyway, so I guess I should probably get into the talk. And that's why I wanted to talk with this idea of the decision to risk. And I think one of the things I continue to try to do with Revolution, and I don't know if people see it because, we've been a church traditionally, and now we're calling ourselves a gathering because I feel like church is this place where it's kind of controlling and it can be manipulative, and we have like the progressive church and the conservative church, and it's divided and it's fighting. And I just want to get away from that because I want to do the exact opposite of that. Is I want to bring people together. I want to have hard conversations and do these things. But that comes with a decision that says I'm willing to risk. I'm willing to have the tough conversations. I'm willing to be patient with others and not be offended so easily, and listen to the critique that others have towards me, and hopefully we will be able to talk about those things together and share those. And I do think this is the way for us to have a future within the church, and to reclaim that name, and to see reformation. And I feel like that decision to risk that where I'm asking you to take is really a big thing. And I hope you guys will go along with me on that and take that decision to risk, and that we'll continue to encourage more and more people to do that as well, is to make that decision to risk and try to go to this new place that says it's time to either redefine the church, or to get back to the roots, into the core of what the church was at one time, or realize that we live in a world and a society that's nothing like the book of Acts or the church in the New Testament, or even like the Galatians community, which I think is closest to what we deal with in this country. But with social media, with television, with radio, with podcasts, the world is a different place. And so what does that look like for us? And what do we do as we become disciples? What do we become as what do we become, as apostles of the church, as we move forward, as we bind and loose things within the church, as we have these conversations, as we go, okay, this is what we got to do, something different. And I think there's a lot of places trying things differently and doing things differently, which I think is fantastic. Because I don't think the old way works anymore. So I think it's time for a change. But at the same time, I feel like a voice, not even crying in the wilderness. I feel like I'm crying in like a band's first gig where 5 people showed up, and I'm going, we gotta change. All the 5 of us are gonna get together, and we're gonna change the church, capital C. And it seems a little insane. So anyway, that's kind of the goal. Is that's the idea. That's the thing. I'm asking you to make a decision to risk. I'm asking my conservative friends to make a decision to risk and not toe the line. I'm asking my progressive friends to make a decision to risk and not toe the line, and to think differently, think practically, and but also spiritually. And I'm very influenced by the teachings of Paul Tillich, by the teachings of Dr. King, somewhat by the teachings of Hegel, as I get to know Hegel more and more, and his relationship with Christianity was really beautiful. And of course, I find out every day more and more that I'm very influenced by another person, my mother, Tammy Faye. She is a beacon for me in a lot of ways, and shines for me. And I've read some of her books. I just read one of her books a few months ago, almost a year ago, I Gotta Be Me. And I realized, oh my God, this is where I get so much of my transparency from, and my feeling, my willingness to tell stories, and my willingness to be transparent and to speak to people, a truth that I feel is there. But with the ultimate hope and ultimate concern is love, is that you are loved, you are accepted. So grace has always been my thing. And grace is the idea of saying you are accepted, like Paul Tillich talk, You Are Accepted, which you can Google, it's for free. It's written down, it's not audio, but it's written down, and you are accepted. That whole concept that you are accepted is part of it. Or like my dad used to always say, might still say, God loves you, it really does, but this idea of what does that mean when we take a look back and take it outside of maybe our church setting or our evangelical classes or our Lutheran progressive classes or our mainline denomination classes, and take those off and look at it in a different, unique way into today's world, especially a world that so wants us to be polarized and to pick a side and do things like that, and I don't feel like that's the way to go. So I do have a lot of ground to cover. That's why I'm talking 100 miles an hour. It's also late at night. I haven't done one at late at night. Maybe we should do more late at night. I don't know. You guys can tell me if you like it. What did you do on Saturday night? Oh, I watched Jay talk about Jesus. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Pretty crazy Saturday night. You can all go to brunch tomorrow instead. So one of the things I was looking at and thinking about was the 1 John 4. Now, and I really like 1 John 4, but I've always kind of struggled. But there's parts of 1 John that I struggle with. And I think 1 John 4 really makes those clear of like what the most important things are. And so then when you look at the other things, you can kind of go, oh, and that's the thing about these letters is they're letters. And so they're not meant to be just like made in little chunks, they're meant to be read all the way through, and we do them in little chunks, obviously for time's sake, and commenting and philosophy and theology and all that good stuff. But one of the things I want to challenge you to do right now is, like I said, is like this end of magical thinking, this end of, I'm not saying, like get rid of miracles. I don't want to give up miracles. My mom believed in miracles. I've seen miracles. If you guys know my friend Steve, who's survived AIDS and is still alive and is a wonderful man. The guy is a walking, talking, breathing miracle. But what I'm saying is that we kind of get rid of some of the magical thinking, that we don't, and some of the way of reading the Bible as a law book, as like a legal book to make other people do what we want them to do. I think that's been a big part of the church's downfall, and the biggest problem with the church is trying to say, like, you have to think like us, you have to believe like us, you have to do what we interpret this book to say, and that's probably why I have suspect device written on my Bible, because it's this idea that we want to control you. And you're like, oh, you can come to our church, but if you want to be a member, which is a super part of our church, then you have to agree with everything we say and be underneath our authority and things like that. And I think that's where we start to lose our way a little bit, because we just start to say, well, we as a group or as a denomination or as a board of directors have decided this is the truth, so you don't question it. And the last thing I would want is a group community who's saying, like, you can't question me. Like, of course, question me. That's how I become sharper. That's how I understand how to think better. That's also how I change my mind and repent, which just means change mind or change my way. That's by people saying, Jay, have you ever thought of it this way? One of the greatest things about working on one of my books with the writer is he kept asking me, like, well, how would I say this to my child? Or how would I say this? And I'm going like, oh man, yeah, I didn't think of it like that way and that way. So you're constantly kind of developing new pathways and new ideas, and sometimes you just got to go like, damn, I messed that up. I didn't see that as clearly as I thought I did. So this idea of ending magical thinking, you'll see why I'm saying that here in 1 John. Beloved, and 1 John 4, beloved, do not believe in every spirit. So we're talking about spirits, which seems a little, but listen to this and listen to what the spirit it's talking about. Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirit to see whether they are from God, or many false prophets have gone into the world. So when it's saying spirit, it's saying, what is this person saying to you? What is this person bringing to you? Like, what is the message here? So what's the spirit of the message is what it's saying. So you can kind of see it a little more practical and a little less like, oh, there's like a floaty orb, giving us religious, a burning floating orb giving us religious commands. I just think we we live in this world, and we have to live in this world on, live life on life's terms is one of the things we say in the 12-step groups. You learn to live life on life's terms. And what I've learned to do is kind of look at the Bible in life's terms and try to see that in that way. For many false prophets have gone into the world. But this you know, the Spirit of God, every spirit that confesses that Jesus Christ has come to the flesh and from God, and every spirit that does not confess Jesus is not from God. Now, hold on to my atheist friends and my agnostic friends and my other friends of different beliefs and faiths. Let's just continue to look into this a little bit further. And this is the spirit of the Antichrist, on which we have heard that it is coming. And now that it already in the world, little children, you who from God and have conquered them. For the one who is in the greatest, then who is in the world, they are from the world. Therefore that they say is from the world, and the world listens to them. So it's saying, sometimes the greatest people are worldly people. We are from God. Whoever knows God listens to us, which I think is a little bit, come on. Who's ever of God listens to what I have to say. I have a little, and I told you I have issues. And this is why I'm asking you to make a decision to risk, is make the decision to risk to sometimes go like, okay, I'm going to hear you out, because I am going to hear him out, because it gets better. But at this point, I'm going like, oh, so if I listen to you, then that's, it sounds a little like, oh, I'm God's chosen, so listen only to me. We are from God. Whoever knows and listens to us is whoever is not from God does not listen to us. From this we know the spirit of truth and the spirit of error. Now, this is where it gets a little more clear what the person's saying. But if you just took like this verse, it would be different. And it's funny because it talks about there are many false prophets who have gone out into the world. And I mean, just this past week, I was being confronted as a false prophet, which is really interesting because I don't get that as much anymore, and being an ear tickler and things like that. But when it says here, listen to this, when it says, is not from God, and this is the spirit of the Antichrist, in which you have heard that it is coming. Now, I want to talk to you a second about that. What is Antichrist? So in order to understand Antichrist, you're going to have to understand Christ. Okay? And so, to me, Antichrist is rebuilding the old law. For me, Antichrist is saying, I have to do something in order to be accepted. For me, Antichrist is hating your enemy. For me, Antichrist is not loving your neighbor as yourself. To me, is jiving straight into capitalism and getting rich even when you see other people below you broken, and you just decide, I just need more. Who cares if these people can't pay rent? I don't want to pay them a living wage, because if I pay them a living wage, then I can't have my other jet or my other thing, or I can't do this. I mean, I'm simplifying it, but you get what I'm saying? So you have all these people struggling and poor, and they can't get up, and you have like 5 of the richest people in the world running everything, and you're going like, what's going on? Well, that's kind of that like Antichrist spirit, because it's not worried about the community, it's not worried about the neighbor, it's not worried about the least of the, and it's not worried about the enemy. So that makes it a little bit clearer, rather than some guy in like a suit who's like, I'm going to be the president, and I'm the Antichrist, and like all the movies I saw growing up as a kid, like it's almost comical. And because it says spirit, it doesn't say like human. It doesn't say like the guy is going to show up and be like, "Buh, buh, 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 buh." And if you want to talk about Revelation with me, one day I'm going to do a talk on Revelation. And the reason I want to do a talk on Revelation is so we can explain what it is. Now, I was just thinking the other day, because I'm doing a lot of work on this documentary about my folks. And there was a person back in those days involved with my parents, and the guy really seemed to be really into like working with preachers who were like demanded that their way or the highway, wanted politics and Christianity to be intertwined, no gay rights, you know, all this stuff, just anti everything. And it was like these group of people who were just known for everything they were against. And I don't think what people got from Jesus's message was what he was against. I think what people got from Jesus's message was, oh, there may be some hope for me too, you know. And even when Jesus made it sound hopeless, like remember the Samaritan woman at the table, and she goes, well, Lord, will even the dogs get crumbs from the table, right? And he goes, you're right. I mean, Jesus has this moment of like, oh, you're right. It's not just the Jews, you know, it's the Gentiles too. We see something miraculously, we see this miraculous thing happen in this story with Jesus, and we just kind of read over it like, oh, well, he just did that so someone could write it down and put it in a story. You know, it's like, no, I mean, if that happened, Jesus had a moment. If Jesus had to go through Samaria to speak to a Samaritan woman who was rejected amongst even the Samaritans who were rejected by the Jews, you see that Jesus is drawn to all these different types of folks, you know. And so when the Samaritan woman at the well goes back into her community, she goes, come meet someone who told me everything about me, you know, and seems to still accept me. And this guy's got some good news, and it's like, it doesn't matter where we're going to worship from now on. I mean, there's something going on. You've got to come see this guy. Like, she becomes the first Samaritan evangelist. So it's like, right? And someone asked me if I was referring to a certain person. That was one of the people I was, yes. But going to 1 John 4:7, it says, beloved, let us love one another, because love is from God, and everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. Now, how different is this from what we just read just a second ago, where it says, you know, if you have Jesus and you claim Jesus as your personal, you know, then, you know, and now all of a sudden John shifts and says, love each other. If someone loves you, they know God. So something's happening here. There's a shift, which is what he's doing, kind of what I just did with the Antichrist spirit thing, is he's saying the Antichrist spirit is those who don't know love. Those who don't have love for others. And so how do we love others? You know, how do we learn to love others? It takes patience. It takes this, you know. Unfortunately, I think in the church we have a lot of like counterfeit love of like, well, let's just dig our feet in the sand and tell people they're really bad. And then we'll tell them that we're telling them they're bad because we love them. And I'm not saying that these folks don't actually believe that, but it's often this very conditional way of saying, you know, you're bad, I'm good, you don't have it figured out, you got to get it figured out in order to be like me. And that's not the message of grace. That's not the message of Christ. That's not the message of Paul. You might be able to argue that James has a little bit of that flair, and the First Peter has a little bit of that flair. But I would also be able to argue the James one pretty well. First Peter, I'd probably have to go through one more time and have a talk about that. So, beloved, let us love one another, because love is from God, and everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. Like I said, this book is not issue free, but I feel like this covers a lot of the issues I have with this book. Whoever does not love does not know God, for God is love. And I've always thought this was interesting, because usually when I've talked about this verse, particularly God is love, or said God is love, especially like 15 years ago, a lot of my neo-Calvinist friends would be like, Jay, love is only one. God is more than just that. God, you know, I think God is probably the ground of being, not really a being, and maybe God is outside of existence, you know, because or maybe God is a being. I mean, there's lots of questions, okay? Lots of questions of what God is and what God isn't, and I'm not going to solve those today in this talk. But whoever does not love God does not know God, for God is love. So in 1 John, one thing that sometimes it's funny when literalists don't like to take things literal. And this is one of those facts where you have to pay attention, where they don't like to take this literal, because they like to say, well, go back here and go back here. You know, I'm like, well, this is the new covenant. This is Christianity. We're dealing with something new. And First John is stating that God is love. I have a friend of mine who says, I just don't want to have anything to do with God. Love is my thing. Love is my thing. And I always think to them like, well, that's God. I mean, love is infinite. Love is something you pass on. There's still aspects of people who loved me as a young child that I'm still passing on. I can think of people, I name them. Tommy Stamps, George Gardner, Beth Mills, Don Hardister. I mean, these were people who were security guards who worked for my parents. Vias Vito, who was a therapist who worked for me. These are people who showed me love and grace that I thought, this is something special here. These people see me. I feel seen. I feel connected to. I feel loved. And this is something I want to pass on to other people. This is something I want to pass on with my kids. And what were those? I'll give you an example. George, teaching me how to tie my shoes. Tommy, teaching me how to throw a spiral football in the afternoon and ride my bike. My dad was really busy, but these guys took these small moments and allowed me to feel valuable, accepted, loved. And I think that's stuff we often take for granted. Also, when my dad was in prison, there was this pastor named Phil Shaw, who was a Assemblies of God pastor in Rochester, Minnesota, who when my dad came, he was like, I'm going to visit Jim, and I'm going to say, Jim, I'm here for you. I'm going to pick up your family. I lived with Phil Shaw for a while when I was working on my dad's appeal. It was just one of those things where there were these people who just were like, we didn't, I've talked about a pastor last week about one of these pastors who was just like, we didn't agree on anything, but I felt love. I felt acceptance. I felt, and maybe that presence of love is somehow the presence of the infinite within our finiteness, because our finiteness passes away. Some of these people who pass away and are gone, Vias Vito, she's gone. But I still felt that love and that grace, even though we disagreed on a lot of theology, God's love was revealed amongst us in the way God sent his Son into the world that we might live through him. And this love is not that we loved God. Now listen, it's not that we loved God, but that God loved us and sent God's Son to be the atoning sacrifice for our sins. Beloved, since God loved us so much, we also ought to love one another. No one has ever seen God. If we love one another, God lives in us, and his love is perfected in us. So the question, who do I love? What do I love when I love my God? What do I love when I love God? And this is even like if you're a Christian atheist, let's say, I don't really, I like the principles. I don't believe in the spiritual stuff, but but you take it this way. How you would take this is well, how do I love a God that I don't even know that is there? I love the other. I love the least of these. I love my enemies. Now, takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. There'll always be people who are just too hard to love that you're going to have to pray for and hope that somebody else loves, and you're going to deal with that. And there'll be times where you can do it. But life is a roller coaster sometimes, a lot of ups and downs. But if we love another, God lives in us, and his love is perfected in us when we love others. And it's like working out. It's like going to the gym. One of the things I loved about working with Soul Force, which is this Christian gay rights activist group, and we practiced Dr. King's and Gandhi's ideas of nonviolence. But we would go in and we would meet with different churches that were, not supporting gay people, had these members with, what was it called? The Exodus International, these will pray the gay away, straighten you out kind of thing. And we would go meet with these folks, and we would try to love these folks right where they were at. We would try to meet these people right where they were at. And we'd have tough conversations. We'd have hard conversations. We would show the best love and best grace we could. For me, sometimes I was the bad cop because, all my LGBT friends were able to tell their stories. And then I was like the irate straight ally going like, you guys got to get this together. And we had some successes. But after every time we would have these meetings with people, or we'd have protest or something like that, we'd always have a debriefing where we came back into a room and sat down and we talked, and sometimes we cried, sometimes we laughed, sometimes we, it was just, you never know what it was, but you had to like reset after that intense moment of trying to love those who don't necessarily love you or love you in a very conditional way and can't accept you completely. And so we would have to really recover. And I think of it in a way of like a workout. As you work out, and then afterwards you got to drink some chocolate milk or power milk or whatever. As you can tell, I'm not a big gym guy. But it's that constant, working, talking out what worked, what didn't work, what's happening. And so it's a process of learning to love people. And what I love is, like, if you look on my latest Instagram message, I put up, Dr. King's daughter put up a thing of nonviolence. And the last one, 6, all these 6 different ideas for nonviolence. And 6 is reconciliation. So reconciliation is the point of nonviolence. It's not to be right. It's not to rule over people. It's to be reconciled into a family of love. Love, reconciliation, grace. Like in Galatians, if you think you're too good to reconcile or help someone back up on their feet, you're fooling yourself. So reconciliation is always the point. Now, if you hear this type of message, and I think this is a type of message that is revolutionary, I think it is a type of message that is Reformation worthy, this is good news. And we start to share the good news with others. And someone's disagreeing with me about MLK and something. I missed it, so I'm sorry. I've read almost every book MLK's written, and I've read some of Gandhi's work as well. So that's my defense there. And I also have a bunch of King's speeches and on records. That's just one, but I have a bunch on vinyl. And on my phone. Anyway, but reconciliation was the point. And I don't think I will say with this is it was like, you can't force someone to love me, but if we are able to change laws and things, at least it'll keep them from lynching me. But I think reconciliation played into that. I think the idea of Dr. King saying that people aren't my enemies, misinformation is my enemies, is a very clear point that there was love involved in that. 13 says, by this we know that we abide in him and he in us, because he has given us the Spirit. And what is the Spirit now? What's going on in us? That Spirit of love that we just talked about. And we have seen and do testify that the Father has sent his Son, the Savior of the world. God abides in those who confess that Jesus is the Son of God. Here we go again. And abide in God. So we have known to believe in love that God has for us. So once again, it's saying for those who abide in God, but First John just said, God is love. Those who abide in God. So those who abide in love. I recently had a person I really respect really well tell me that he didn't think I could really teach people how to love. There had to become an instinct or something. I disagree a little bit there. I do think we can teach each other to love. I think we can teach each other to do patience, and I think that comes from tough conversations, good conversations, and recommending good books. A letter from a Birmingham jail is fantastic, another fantastic letter that I kind of think should have been canonized in the Bible because it was pretty amazing. Again, as we look here at the end of 16, before 17, it says, God is love, and those who abide in love abide in God, and God abides in them. So once again, just following that, it reiterates God is love. So I think when we judge people by their fruit, we have to ask, is there love there? Is there peace? Is there patience? Is there kindness? Is there joy? Is there love? And what does that look like? And, it might be more wishy-washy. It might be a little more universalism for some of you. It might make you uncomfortable. It's okay. I'm here to make you uncomfortable. I'm here for the pushback. I just wish the comments would stay up longer so I could interact a little more with you guys. Love has been perfected amongst us in this, that we may have boldness on the day of judgment, because that As he is, so are we in this world. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out all fear. And so here's another thing is that when we work with people, we don't need to rule by fear or by guilt. And for me growing up, when a lot of different pastors I'd worked for when I was younger and things like that, there were or youth groups and things, there was a lot of guilt involved, often a lot of fear, like the man of God, and so you kind of like, well, I feel a little bit like, I knew other Christians who I just felt like shame around all the time, like, oh, I'm not good enough to be around them. Like, I don't feel like a real Christian when I'm around this person. I felt judged and things like that. And so that creates the idea of, well, what about fear God with all your heart and all your mind? What about fear God? And then you have to look at the translation for that particular fear. And that nuance, there's these different meanings for singular words in the English that we don't, that the Greek and Hebrew have. And so fear is often, it's not saying fear God, it's saying respect, awe, and wonder with God. It's the awe and wonder. It's the reverence. It's not the, I'm afraid. So, because if perfect love casts out all fear, then this book needs to be torn out as well. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out all fear. So when we're working with one another and we're having these tough conversations, I guess the thing to ask ourselves and to ask even those we're communicating with through these tough conversations is, are we providing a place where love is felt, or are we providing a place where there's fear is felt? And if there's fear, then maybe it's time we back up and go, oh, this is going to be a little bit of a longer relationship. This is going to be a few conversations. This is not going to just be one conversation. Maybe there's going to be some reading books together, that type of thing. Love has been perfected amongst, okay, there is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out all fear. For fear has to do with punishment. Hear that? Fear has to do with punishment, and whoever fears has not reached perfection in love. We love because he first loved us. Those who say, I love God and hate a brother or sister are lying. But I want to read this one more time. Whoever fears, we love, okay. Right here it says, love casts out fear, for fear has to do with punishment. And I don't know about how many of you have felt, and this is where I have issues with my father's theology, with some of my friends' theology, who are like end of days people, or God's wrath is coming upon you, or street preachers that we often see, or like these really macho Calvinist, neo-Calvinist guys who are like, yeah, and then God's going to burn everybody, and blah, blah, and there's this fear. And so when you're pushing fear and trying, and that's the old thing. I mean, I remember as a kid, hearing so many things like, if you were to drive home tonight, there's no conversation, Jay, you're the only one talking. Okay, Joseph, I'm sorry. This is a sermon. This is a talk. I'm encouraging you to have tough conversations. And I'm sorry that I'm the only one talking because this is a talk. That's how talks work. So, I don't have, your comment literally comes up for 2 seconds and then disappears. So, and this goes out to hundreds of people who listen online. But, you could send me a direct message on Instagram if you'd like. But perfect love casts out all fear. And for fear has to do with punishment. Whoever fears has not reached perfection in love. So when we're casting fear or we're sitting in fear, there's something missing, because if we were to be perfected in love, to build that love that never gives up, never loses faith, is always hopeful, and endures through every circumstance, that's Corinthians 13, 4-7. If we have that type of love, we're able to sit within it and not have that fear. When the church is continuously, this is the thing I was going to talk about before the text came up. Is that I remember going to a sermon where it's like, if you got, he would tell me, this preacher would say, oh, there was this guy and he was at my rally and I was speaking, and and he felt called to come up to the front, but he didn't that night, and he felt bad. And he just couldn't do it. He just felt like he was too bad. And unfortunately, that night he got onto his motorcycle and got onto the highway and was in an accident and died and went to hell because he never met Jesus. I remember another pastor one time, he had the microphone and he was going, bum, 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 bum. If you were to die tonight, so that's manipulation. Okay. That's fear. That's fire insurance. That's life insurance. That's saying it's all about heaven or hell. And that's where we miss it. We miss this point. We get so minded towards an afterlife that we forget we forget to believe in life before death because we're so worried about life after death. And I don't have a whole lot of answers for you about life after death. But I want to see us to be able to live well and to build a community and see a long-lasting change, that my kids will be a part of a different church, your children and your family will be different parts of the church will become something that's brand new, interesting, and where conservatives and progressives and Democrats and Republicans and black and white and gay and straight can come together and learn to not fear each other and to love each other and grow from those relationships. But it sounds like pie in the sky right now, but you got to talk about it. We got to talk about it. We got to say this is good news, and supposedly the Bible says people who bring good news are beautiful feet. And so I want us to be beautiful feet. But like I said before, is like Tillich was saying in his teachings, is that we have to make a decision to risk. And are you willing to make that decision to risk? Like earlier a comment that said, oh, Jay, you're the only one talking. We're not having a conversation. Well, I'm not asking you to have a decision to risk to have just a conversation with me, but I'm asking you to have the decision to risk to have the conversation with other people in your life, maybe church people or non-church people, or when these issues come up of, that you're so set on, that maybe you're willing to say, hey, let's have a conversation and hear each other. Let's not talk past each other. Let's not just send a little message on social media that just tears each other apart. Let's hear what the other is saying. Now, sometimes if we hear what other people are critiquing about us, we're able to kind of see what, through their experiences, through their lives, through the things that they've learned, through their own traumas, what they're feeling from us, even if that's not what we intend to put out there. And I'll give you an example. This is not greatest example, but it's the one that comes to mind at first. When I lived in Los Angeles, California, my dad was at this place called the Dream Center in LA. And it was a big Assemblies of God mission thing. They bought this old hospital and they had all these different types of ministries in there and all this kind of stuff. And I lived on the grounds. I lived on the property, and I lived in this old nunnery called Casa del Grande, the big house. And so I lived in there with a bunch of different people. And to go from there into the hospital, there was this, about a half a mile little place, just kind of like was originally a parking lot that I would walk across. And I've always been a very shy, kind of insecure, introverted person. And so, there'd be all these people and I didn't know what to do. And do I make eye contact? Do I not make eye contact? Do I just say hello? Do I not say hello? So I would just go into my office. I would just walk and, go into my office. And then one day I was sitting down with some guys who were a bunch of like big ex-gangbangers. And we were all sitting down and they all had come to talk to my dad. And they were all in my room and we started talking. And I started saying like, yeah, man, it's so crazy. Like in that kind of public area, when I walk through, I feel really weird and insecure, and I don't know what to say to anybody. And I don't know what people think. And my mind is moving 100 miles an hour. And this guy goes, really? He's like, because I just thought you were just an asshole. Like I just thought you were like this stuck up preacher's kid. Like, oh, you're Jim Baker's kid. Your shit doesn't smell. And you thought you were better than us, or that you didn't want to have anything to do with us. And I was like, God, that's not at all. And I'm like, dude, you're like a giant guy covered in tattoos who looks super cool. Like I totally want to hang out with you and talk to you, and I would love to talk to you. Honestly, I was just intimidated, and like we had this conversation and it was like we all kind of laughed about it and we all became friends. But it came just because this completely misunderstanding of us not having a conversation, not talking, and it took them to basically just be honest with me and say, he's come off like an asshole. Let me be like, oh, I'm like, it's so funny that we can put on this armor, like we can be insecure, and that we just try to protect ourselves, and we're protecting ourselves so well that people think that we're, snobbish or unapproachable or something like that. And when really I was just like, man, I'd really like to have more friends here, you know. So that's part of the thing. We love because he first loved us. Those who say I love God and hate their brothers and sisters are liars. For those who do not love brothers and sisters whom they have seen, listen to this, cannot love God whom they have not seen. So it's saying, like, when we can't love people in front of us, and I think I wish talks like this would have been given to like parents in like the 80s and 90s who are kicking their gay kids out. I mean, like, man, like putting a kid on the street isn't loving them. I mean, that's just not it. It doesn't matter what your church is telling you. It's time to leave that church. That's toxic. Your love never gives up, never loses, always hopeful, endures through every circumstance. These are your children. What do I love when I love my God? I love the other. Well, your children are even more than the other. It's like that's how we experience love, is through each other. And so, when we see this, like, how do I love? I can't claim to love this entity that's the space god or the ground of being or the that which exists outside of that which is outside of existence. That what was Caputo said, God doesn't exist, God insists. That's a lot of philosophy that would spend time to take apart. Maybe we can get Pete to come in and talk about that, or maybe Jack Caputo himself to come talk about that. That would be fantastic. For those who do not love their brothers and sisters whom they have seen cannot love a God whom they have not seen. The commandments that we have from him is this: those who love God must love their brothers and sisters also. And so that's what we're called to. That's the idea. And it's not rocket science. It's not, when the Bible talks about love, it's not talking about a different type of love that we don't understand. It's not, it's not talking about this love disrespects and demands its own way and belittles people for not being where they need to be. It's not that. I mean, there is times where you do speak truth to people, like Dr. King speaking truth to racists and things like that. I mean, there's times where I speak truth to my legalistic friends, and there's sometimes I speak truth to, like, I've got a friend who's a proper theologian, but they always take these cheap shots to my conservative brothers and sisters, and I go, hey, you're better than that, man. Like, you've got all this knowledge, you've got all these degrees. You're better than that, and I think you're being a bit of a freaking progressive fundamentalist. And I said, but listen, the only reason I'm telling you this is because I do truly care about you, because I do truly respect your work, and I do respect what you're doing, but I think you're missing something here, And that was a hard conversation to have. But we had that conversation now, and I've had similar people come up and have that similar types of conversation with me, like, hey, you said you love everybody and that everybody can work here or volunteer here, but you don't want me to volunteer because of A, B, or C. And I have to sit down and go, like, you're right. Like, I didn't realize I kind of had like this, everybody's welcome, but this person, or this thing that I don't understand, and I was like, you're right, and I said, I'm sorry, and I said, let's do this, and we did, and it changed my life, and it was very uncomfortable. When he first said it to me, I felt like I felt like this big. I was like, oh, I was wrong. So this idea of love, this perfect love that casts out all fear, these ideas that how do we, we have to love the other. Prime example in my life for this type of love was my mother. I mean, I would watch my mother. We would go shopping. We'd go to the malls. We'd go to flea markets, and she liked to shop. That was her therapy. And we'd be in the public a lot, and it made me kind of uncomfortable because everybody's looking at my mom, and I'm, like I said, an introvert guy, so I'm always kind of like walking behind her a little bit, and people are stopping her, and I'm just sitting there, hi. And people would often say sometimes very mean things to her, And if they said mean things to her, sometimes I would react in a very aggressive way. But my mother was like, no, 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 honey. She'd be like, hey, listen, if you're going to talk about me, at least meet me. And she'd introduce herself and my name's Tammy and blah, blah, blah. And she'd start talking to them. And she always tried to love those who persecuted her. And it's really ridiculous that my mother, Tammy Faye, people have made movies and Elton John's making a play about it and everybody's doing this thing. But how I knew her is this person who did her best to love people even when they treated her like shit, even when they treated her like a laughing stock, when they made fun of her. She didn't change because they made fun of her. She just said, this is who I am. And at least meet me, at least give me a chance. You've only seen what the news says about me. You've only seen the media. You've only got a caricature of me, but this is who I am. I'm Tammy Faye, who obviously likes to go to flea markets just like you. And this is my son, and he likes to get, Guns N' Roses bootlegs, whatever I was buying back then. And so, I learned so much from her. And so I was thinking about that and all my doubt and the many issues I have with the church, which are many, and even some of the issues I have with the Bible as well. And that comes from scholarship and reading and really proper education and investigation into the Bible, because I do hold it important. I don't think people realize that sometimes when we're critical of things, it's because those things are very important to us and we love them and we want people to see that. But also the fear we have to conform to those ideals, to conform to certain ideals in certain ways and certain traditions of the church and in certain ways the church is set up. And I've seen it many times where people have just felt back into the old way of thinking just because it's comfortable. Legalism works. There's boundaries. It's not, free and dilly like grace. And there's, black and white and there's answers. And they think it's free of contradiction. But I'll tell you what, nothing is free from contradiction. There's contradictions in everything. And some contradictions we can confront, and then some contradictions we learn to live with, and that's okay, because sometimes there's something even greater than the truth that comes above a contradiction. But we often have the fear to go back and to conform into those things, also because of the cost. What happens if it it costs me everything if I follow my convictions? What if it costs me this? And watching the Sinead O'Connor documentary earlier, she had this conviction because she knew about, she was reading all about the molestation that were happening by priests in the church. And so she ripped up a picture of the Pope, and it cost her career for a long time. Of course, now we're all going, oh, she was right. Oh, we should have listened. Oh, she's a hero, And that's great. And what's really great about that is she's still alive to see this. And so I'm grateful for that. I feel like that's beautiful. Usually people are dead by the time we realize, oh, thank goodness they said that. So yeah, I feel like I'm at a point where I've sacrificed almost everything just to do these talks, not everything, but I've sacrificed a lot in my own life, and I've made mistakes in my own life. And there's always this wanting to, like, maybe if I just worked at a normal church, maybe if I just did this, and stopped pushing the envelope, stopped reading philosophy, stopped reading theology, didn't, just let that stuff go, or just got a normal job. But that's not the road I believe in. I believe that this work is a type of art as well. Anyway, my question is, will we wake up? Will we risk, or shall we fade away? And if we do fade away, I at least hope that the message of love, and that God is love, and that love is infinite, and the true meaning of love is like loving your enemies, not just loving those in your own group, or those in your own world, those who are just like you. that we'll learn to live into that, you know, and that we be able to learn to, learn to love in the gray area and get away from the black and white thinking and from all the binary thinking, and that we are able to live within the dialectics where two negatives, sometimes there's truth in both those things, and even a greater truth when we look at the dialectics of those things. But this requires thinking, this requires patience, this requires time, this requires studying. And that's why I enjoy this work so much, is that it's allowed me to spend time reading philosophy and theology and scholarship and biblical history and things like that. And I'm able to share it with you and hopefully encourage you to join me and make the decision in risking, you know. So I hope, Sinead O'Connor did convert to Islam. She's converted to a lot of different faiths, which is really interesting that faith is something that's a part of her. She's a seeker and she's seeking truth. You know, it's very punk rock. Give me some truth. Oh, didn't find it here. Give me some more truth, you know. So, yeah. I'm not asking you to make any decisions. I'm just trying to say, well, I am. The only decision I'm trying to ask you to make is the decision to risk and be a part of the revolution gathering and just make the decision to risk. Even if this is the only talk you ever listen to and you just decide, I'm going to go out there and risk it. And I'm going to go out and love people. And I'm going to go out and try something different because the church as we know it doesn't seem to be working well. And maybe there's a different way to do it. And maybe we can figure out what that looks like together. Maybe it's just living our lives well, you know, and maybe meeting up once a month instead of once a week. Who knows? I don't. But I'm grateful for you guys listening today. I'm sweating. Sorry, Sorry, I'm not going to be able to talk tomorrow, but that was why I did it tonight. So if you know people who listen and you talk to, could you let them know that the talk has already been done? Of course, it'll be available tonight and tomorrow if someone wants to watch it at 11 because they like Habit. It'll be there at 11. It'll be there all the time. It'll be there as long as YouTube lets us stay. So thank you so much. Hey, if you like what we're doing, if you appreciate what we're doing, if you want to support the work of Revolution, there's a couple ways you can do it. You can go to revolutionchurch.com and you can make donation there, which helps me get paid, helps me do this, allows me to do reading things. I think I also do another job as well, but it allows me to continue this work, and hopefully we'll see where it goes, talking to different people about different things with this church. Also, another thing we can do is you can just share these talks. If this talk touched you, and you just tell somebody about it, you know, retweet it, throw it up on Instagram, go to our Revolution Church Instagram and put it in your story and let people know you liked it and watch it, tell people about it, subscribe to our YouTube channel, ask people to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Those are other ways that help us do this work. Yeah, thanks a lot, everybody. Have a great week. I'll see you next week. And yeah, see you.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed this podcast. To make your 100% tax-deductible donation today, please visit revolutionchurch.com/donate. You can also learn more by clicking the donate section on the website.